Hello guys, I've really been missing being in class. Trust me, I'd way rather be there than here. But I thought it might go well if I read to you and highlighted certain parts of some background information you guys are going to need to do assignment for today, as well as a couple assignments coming up in the future. So I have emailed an article to Miss Munoz, and I believe she's probably printed out copies for you guys to look on while I read this. So please follow along quietly while I read it to you. Okay? Thought it might be interesting if all my students had a little background knowledge about the role of women in the American Revolutionary War. Something we don't often think about. The Revolutionary War in America between 1776 and 1783. Americans declared independence from Britain in 1776 by writing the Declaration of Independence. And the British sent troops to the colonies to quell the revolt. Patriots, those were Americans who supported the Revolution, fought against the British and colonial Loyalists. Americans who did not want independence from Britain were called Loyalists. During the war, some women helped the Patriots and others sided with the Loyalists. Some women, although not Loyalists themselves, were affected by their husband's loyalty to Britain, which jeopardized their safety during the war. The same was true for women whose husbands were patriots. Now let's pause there for a moment. Imagine being a woman whose husband supported British rule in the colonies. Her opinion did not matter to those of the people in her community. Her husband would be helping British soldiers and other colonists who wanted to help British soldiers, so he would be gone. Potentially any sons they had would be gone, and the wife would be left back in the house. Now, what about the Patriots? Do you think they might be a little irritated with the woman staying in the house and her husband and possibly children fighting against the very cause the Patriots thought was right, i.e., America being its own country? Of course they'd be irritated. Do you think they might want to punish her for going against them? I think people would today, right? So does it make sense in that context that women sometimes were punished? They were the ones who had the negative side effects of viewpoints inflicted upon them. Okay? Throughout the war, many women maintained the household economy. For example, they took care of the farms, they took care of the family businesses, and they protected their property while husbands and sons were at war. The wartime role is a job, of these women was to maintain such activities until the men returned home. In addition, both the British and American armies had women camp followers who lived in the camps helping out with chores. Something you probably did not think about. You only thought of men in those army camps in the 1780s and late 1770s. There were women there too. They had to have people help them with the camps. The wartime role of these women was to maintain such activities until the men returned home. In addition, both the British and American armies had women camp followers who lived in the camps helping out with chores. Some women even enlisted in the American Continental Army, disguised as men, although this was illegal. The Army's medical units included women who served as nurses. Women further supported the effort by feeding and providing clothing for the soldiers. Some Loyalist women passed information about American troops to the British. Let's stop there. Which side did the Loyalists support? Did they support the British? Or did they support an American free country? Okay? The Loyalists are going to be the ones that were supporting Britain ruling the American colonies. Okay? So some of the women nurses would kind of be the spies and pass on information to those who were sympathetic to the British soldiers. Okay. Women further supported the effort by feeding and providing clothing for the soldiers. Some Loyalist women passed information about American troops to the British, and women could be accused of being spies or sympathizers simply by giving sanctuary British soldiers in their homes. Married women could have their homes and farms taken if their husbands were loyalists. Physical violence was another reality women faced during wartime when either army occupied an area. In Connecticut and New Jersey, violence against women and girls occurred. It became a symbol of power for the victorious side, with women and girls the victims of the practice. That still goes on today, guys. As I've mentioned before, there's different kinds of slavery. There's a different kind of slavery that goes on today. Another term for it's human trafficking. And that's what this article that I found denotes. It talks about women and girls specifically, probably some little boys too, but definitely girls. They were something that was traded out like a good, i.e. a package of crackers. And the winner of that battle or that skirmish at that town would be the one that would hurt the women or hurt the children. That has gone on for thousands of years, and unfortunately, that very much is the kind of slavery that still goes on today. Human trafficking. All right, next paragraph. On January 1st, 1776, the Continental Army began recruiting to build up its infantry, rifle, and artillery regiments, which included more than 20,000 men. If a woman wanted to enlist, she did so illegally by disguising herself as a man. For example, Deborah Sampson used the name Robert Shirtliff to enlist. It was not until she was wounded in battle and consequently undressed by a doctor that her true identity was discovered. However, her brave and patriotic behavior received compliments rather than punishment. A few women went into the battlefield with their husbands or took their husbands' places after they were killed on the battlefield. For instance, Mary Hayes fired artillery cannons against the British and stayed with her husband, a gunner, during the war. Margaret Corbin took over her husband's cannon when her husband was killed by enemy fire. The army allowed women to stay with their husbands, fathers, or sons, mainly because some men might not have joined the regiments if their women were not allowed to go with them. Some women brought their children with them as well. Now, I got to interject my thing of common sense and reality in there. Do you think it was that common to have women and children out on the Continental Army battlefields with the British soldiers and with the loyalists to the British side fighting, or even helping the men be fixed up or buried? Because I find that hard to believe. I happen to think that it was probably more along the lines of there were a few women here and there. It wasn't that it was exclusively a male-driven revolution. Women did have their roles. It allowed them to stay together with their spouses, with their children, sometimes. And it also allows us to see that this has been an ongoing battle, trying to integrate male and female people to work together for a long time now. Now, if you look at the picture on this next page, it says women intelligence writers from South Carolina during the Revolutionary War intercepting dispatches. To intercept means to catch, to interrupt, to stop. A dispatch means like a letter. Like when my little angels in my class are passing notes in class, that's a dispatch. So you see the picture, the person that is long dark hair and it kind of has a dark jacket and dark pants, and if I'm looking at it correctly, it's like the second person from the left. That's, I think, a woman, and she has caught men trying to pass messages. Back then it could be written, it could be spoken in some kind of code, and she was apparently good at catching the message. That's what the picture is about. Okay, let's keep reading. At first, women camp followers were seen as a burden for the troops, but later even George Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, would see the value of women in the camps. He saw that women could serve as nurses, but their status was low among the hospital staff. Main duties were custodial. Nurses were paid poorly because their work was not seen as skilled employment. Female nurses could free up men so that they could take care of wounded, so more men could be out on the battlefield. That's a major advantage. If you have a lot of people who are sick, and you have to leave people behind to take care of the sick, and some of your people are sick, that means you've lost a lot of your fighters. You don't want that. You want to minimize those losses. Utilizing someone who can't be out there fighting, that's a good way of minimizing those losses of humans. You need the fighters out in the field. In 1777, a Continental Army medical group requirement indicated that every 100 wounded needed 1 matron and 10 female nurses. Now, the literal term matron means mom. So we're talking about a woman caregiver, okay? Like a teacher. The nurses took non-medical direction from the matron, who supervised the hospital and distributed medicine under the supervision of a surgeon. Women were involved in other activities at camps and battle sites as well. They molded bullets, they carried water and gunpowder, and assisted at the cannons, for example. Now, I'm thinking Jeremiah. Would you think, Jeremiah, that it would be a very safe job to be standing relatively close to where they're shooting and capturing bullets that have already been fired, especially those that have already hit somebody or something, and taking them and melting them and pouring them into a new mold, bringing cold water to them so they can cool quickly, and, regathering the gunpowder? Would that seem like a easy job away from other bullets cutting down a person, or does that still seem kind of dangerous? I'm thinking I wouldn't like that job very much. That's one of the jobs they would give women to do. They say it wasn't on the front line because they weren't actually pulling the cord for the cannon, but that sounds kind of dangerous to me. Although women were seen as non-official auxiliaries, to be an auxiliary means an add-on, they did draw rations from the army. Does anybody know what a ration is? Children who accompanied them received a half ration. When food supplies were tight, women and children used a part of the rations, which the soldiers desperately needed. So, excuse me, guys. Let's say a woman had a ration for 1 loaf of bread. That was part of the ration for being a woman in the regiment. So her child would have a ration for half a loaf of bread. And that ration would be expected to last them a month. So for that 1 month, that woman and child was supposed to receive a loaf and a half of bread. Well, times are getting tough. It's winter. There's no food coming through. People are eating bits of grain right off the grass. They're mixing it with sawdust. They're getting upset tummies. They have less and less stuff that they can use to make this bread. Well, who are they going to feed first? The ones that are there to fight the battle and kill the other side? Or the ones that are taking care of those people that are fighting? What about that? Okay. Women did have their function in the army. Their tasks were valuable, especially because men were not adept, in other words, they were not good at chores such as cleaning and mending and washing clothes. To mend means to fix. So sometimes when there were not enough supplies, the regiments would send the women back home, if they had a home, if armies hadn't gone through and burned them down, or others hadn't moved into their home. At the start of the Revolution, the British Army limited the number of women accompanying its troops to 1 woman for every 10 men. Remember, this is the British side. But this ratio later increased. The Continental Army did not set a quota for the ratio of men and women, because they realized that they're going to need women to help them. In general, women's participation in combat depended on whether men were able to fight the enemy. As the men left home to join the army, few were left in the towns to defend them. So women stayed back. They took care of the farms. They took care of the homes. They defended those villages and those farms from British and British Loyalists who came through attacking. So the women kind of had to take on the role of townsfolk and protectors. Then there were other women who were left behind in those towns, and their husbands left for Britain. Or their husbands left to go work with the British Loyalists. how do you think the Patriots treated those women, the wives of British loyalists that were left behind? The wives of loyalists were regarded as enemies because married women were not considered independent from their husbands and did not have property rights. The leaders of the American Revolution seized the property and personal belongings of women married to loyalists. This included items such as carriages, that's like a car, but with horses instead of pistons that move, jewels, clothes, furniture. Loyalist wives were eventually allowed to leave or were expelled by the Patriots. When a woman's husband sided and served with the British, which is probably easier for him, she automatically fell under suspicion of treason. Let's think about that for just a moment, guys. Think about it. This is a Povido. Just imagine, you're married, your husband was born and spent his early years in Britain, and decides when the revolution is about to start that he wants to side with the people he grew up with, British. You talk to your neighbors, you talk to your husband, you kind of see both sides as having a good reason to think what they do. You see the American colonists point that you need representation if they're going to take your money, and you see the British opinion that they've put out so much money and so much protection, and now the Americans just want more and more and more for free. You see both sides, but your husband decides, you know what? I'm going back with where my family's from. I'm going back with England. And he leaves your house, leaves you, 2 boys, and a little girl, and all of them are under 12 years old. And it's you 4 in that house, and you've got to figure out how you're going to have enough money to feed them and dress them and take care of all the needs that your family has. But husband's gone. Things aren't so bad for him because he is supporting the British cause where there is money for him. Unfortunately, the people left in the town with you support the other side. Do you think they're going to help you with your children? Do you think they're going to help you here and there where you need help with groceries a little bit? Or do you think they're going to help you with harvest time if you have to do something on an emergent basis? There are so many times that we as humans help others and that we need help from others. Am I right? That's where things go bad, when you have towns that split up. And that's what occurred in the Revolutionary War. Okay? Mobs threatened women who were suspected of helping the British. Women who actually did so certainly risked their lives. In New Jersey, the penalty for treason, to be treasonous means to go against somebody. The penalty was death. Nevertheless, the first time a woman was convicted, she only had to pay a fine of £300 and serve 1 year in prison only. If convicted a second time, she would receive the death penalty and no reprieve would be granted. In Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia, some women helped to raise funds for the Continental Army. George Washington, worried about giving money to the soldiers directly, said it wasn't a good idea. So he said, give the money to the government. The women said no. Washington said, okay, give them shirts instead. So the women agreed, made them clothes that they could wear during the war. So that was one of the early efforts that women and people back that were not in the war, they were able to do something to help the soldiers who were in the war. Approximately 20,000 women served in various capacities with the Continental Army. That's a lot. A few hundred more were enlisted in various local and state units. And what we mean by that, they might not have worked in the army.